The door doesn't lock, therefore the room could not have been used as a gas chamber, and the sample shows no trace of Zyklon B gas, therefore it could not have been used, are both examples of the snapshot fallacy, in that each attempts to establish a wide-sweeping, far-reaching conclusion on grossly inadequate grounds. These are each curious observations, the like of which call for explanations, but perfectly reasonable, perfectly adequate explanations are available that stop far short of necessitating throwing out the Holocaust or establishing a conspiracy theory in its place. Now observe that, while each of these observations is explained with relative ease, most people don't happen to have these explanations. Does this rule out their existence? Hardly. We know about the Holocaust through a convergence of evidence. If the Holocaust is one big fraud, then that is likewise a historical event, the support of which requires its own convergence of evidence, a convergence the denier will not provide. And now, how do we know that evolution takes place? Well, first we need to clarify what evolution is. A 150-year-long sustained propaganda campaign has ensured that this is the most misunderstood concept in the world, so first, let us clarify. What do we mean? What are we referring to when we talk about evolution? There is to be found on YouTube a video called The Evolution of Dance. What does the title indicate about the content of the video? It indicates that the video is about how dance has changed over time. Change over time is what we're talking about here. Evolution, in the general sense of the word, means change over time. We began using this term within the life sciences because it became apparent to us that life changes over time. Observe that you are different from your parents, who are different from their parents. There is a resemblance, of course, and it is closer in some cases than in others, but there is nonetheless a difference. A certain average amount of change happens from one generation to the next. For this illustration, let's call that amount of change X. In one generation, X amount of change happens on average, which means that on average, in 2 generations, 2x will occur, and in 100 generations, 100x. In 5 million generations, 5 millionx will occur. As the passage of time continues, the difference across the generations becomes so great that it is no longer practical to regard the organisms at opposite ends of the span in question as the same species. But we're not just talking about change over time here. We're talking about descent with modification as a result of mutation and natural selection. What would corroborate this? That is, if this is the A being true in this particular example, what would constitute B turning orange, C turning backwards, D inverting, and so on? Consider spiders for a moment. They're cannibals. That is, the vast majority of the time, whenever 2 spiders cross paths, they fight, and the one who wins the fight kills and eats the one that loses it. Usually this is the larger of the 2. Now I say the majority of the time, because sometimes when they meet, they're the same species but different genders, and it happens to be mating season, and therefore this instinct is dormant, superseded by the mating instinct. Under these circumstances, copulation takes place, and then the normal instincts reassert themselves. The 2 fight, and the winner kills and eats the loser. The winner under these circumstances is usually the female, because she has the advantage of size. Now what if the male had the advantage of size? Well, then he would probably be the victor, and would kill and eat the female he just inseminated, which would mean no eggs, and no reproduction. Thus, in any given spider species, varieties in which the female is larger are able to reproduce, while varieties in which the male is larger are not. I give you natural selection. This is the observable trend in every spider species we have ever checked for it. Now observe that I call them different species, not just varieties of the same species. What kind of difference designates a change in species, and what was merely a change in variety was a problem Darwin and his colleagues used to grapple with quite a bit. The general rule of thumb today is that if 2 organisms are so different that they are unable to produce viable offspring, it's only reasonable at this point to call them different species. It's my understanding that some biologists opine that at this point, the point at which they should be recognized as different species, happens sooner than this, but the overwhelming majority are agreed that, by this point, speciation has definitely occurred. Kirk Cameron observes quite astutely that huskies, schnauzers, poodles, Great Danes, greyhounds, and chihuahuas are all different kinds of dogs, but they're all still dogs. That's true. In the same way that human beings, marmosets, field mice, elephants, kangaroos, seals, whales, and walruses are all different kinds of mammals, but they're all still mammals. But when's the last time someone successfully crossbred an elephant and a koala? It can't be done because they're two different species. Now, when's the last time someone successfully crossbred a Pekingese and a Basset Hound? This can't be done either, for the same reason. These are each domesticated canines, descended from wild canines. Maybe they're descended from wild canine species which still exist, or perhaps they only share a common ancestry with currently existing wild canines. But in either case, here we have the transition from what Cameron himself admits is common ancestry to a state of reproductive incompatibility. This is observed speciation. B is orange. Then there are transitional forms. Some fall under the purview of biology, while most belong to paleontology, but they exist. Whales, dolphins, and porpoises are three different examples of cetaceans, each of which has anywhere from a few to dozens of different species, which are distinctly different and reproductively incompatible, but each has a number of things in common. First, each spends its entire life waterbound, yet depends on lungs for respiration instead of gills. Second, each has skeletons composed of bone instead of cartilage, making them many times sturdier than necessary for oceanic living. Third, each has finger bones, toe bones, and hip bones, but no fingers, toes, or hips. None of this makes any sense at all, unless these animals are each descended from land animals by way of descent with modification. Thus, C is backwards, D is upside down, and E is inside out. Now consider the hippopotamus. Its clumsy form on land does much better in the buoyancy provided by water, where one useful instrument upon which it relies is echolocation. You know, the sort of thing cetaceans rely on. In terms of evolutionary principles, these two facts about the hippopotamus suggest common ancestry with whales, dolphins, and porpoises. F has turned into G, and H has disappeared. And now think about this. The first uncovered transitional fossil was named Archaeopteryx lithographica. Some creationists insist that it was completely a bird. But then why did it have teeth? Others insist it was completely a reptile. Well, then why did it have feathers? Why would it have traits of both phyla, which are otherwise completely unique to these phyla, unless it was a transitional form between the two? Why? Unless I has frozen. Now, what about application? You know that flu shot you get every year? To make it, scientists begin by examining the samples of existing flu strains and drawing on established evolutionary principles to predict the three mutations most likely to arise. The vaccine which results is drawn up as a defense against them. Now granted, it doesn't work every single time, but it does work the vast majority of the time, and if evolution were not true, it would almost never work. J has grown an extra appendage. Evolution is a fact established on the basis of a logically inductive convergence of evidence as firm as that of any scientific principle or historical event. Someone, no doubt, is going to point out that none of this is incompatible with the God did it explanation, or an undefined designer of some kind did it explanation. That's true, except for one key problem. God did it, and an undefined designer of some kind did it, are not explanations. Calling either of these explanations is a misnomer. Scientific explanations are attempts to answer the question, by what process does this happen? Explanations are attempts to describe the process, not the being responsible for an observed phenomenon. If a God or an undefined designer of some kind just did something, just made something, then how? What processes did this designer use? If something is an intelligent design, then how did the being in question design it? Did he, she, or it use a drawing board? If so, then where did the drawing board come from? Did he, she, or it make that as well? If so, then how? Now someone no doubt is going to respond by saying that we can't possibly ever hope to understand how God does something. Well, maybe not. But we can at least try to figure out what processes are responsible for observed phenomena, and our efforts to that end are usually to the benefit of humanity. This pursuit is the whole objective of science. A designer of some kind and evolution are answers to different questions.